All right, so before we kick off the session, I'll just introduce a little bit of our team. I'm Bridget Gilmer with Rodale Institute, and I'm joined here today by some other teammates from Rodale, Emily Miller and Catherine Hugels and Sage Dennis. And we are part of Rodale's organic consulting team. So we support farmers on their transitions to organic. And I'm here focused on markets, so connecting farmers and buyers in the organic marketplace. And we're here thanks to the National Transition to Organic Partnership Program. In partnership with the Organic Trade Association, OTA, we're supporting markets connections between buyers and sellers across the country. So we're hosting events. We have 12 events throughout the country. We had one at O-Grain, and as for another example of a regional grain chain, really working to make these connections and support organic market development. So with that, I'll pass it over to Kyle. I just want to thank Kyle and our panelists here for sharing their perspectives. And here you go.
Round of applause for Rodale. I'm Kyle Pletcher. I'm with Tuscarora Grain Company. I'm an organic grain merchandiser with them, and I've been here this is my 5th year. Before that, I was an organic soybean buyer, just buying organic soybeans. Could you imagine? So now I get to diversify a little bit and touch grains of all different kinds, and talk to farmers and end users in all different walks. So I'll hand the mic over now, and we can all do intros.
Sure. Hey everyone, Kellee James. I'm with a company called Argus, but up until about a year ago, we were Morganics. And it's a company I co-founded more than 10 years ago to follow organic grain markets, supply, demand, prices, and anything that impacted those 3 things.
I'm Scott Morgan. I'm in New Jersey, in the center part of the state. We run Morganics Family Farm, and we also, as a big part of our farm, is milling the grains that we grow. We pretty quickly grew more grains than we could, not enough grains, so we're now as much a miller as we are a grower.
And I'm Michael. I'm with Fieldcraft. We're a marketplace connecting buyers and suppliers of specialty grains and ingredients.
Go ahead.
All right, I'm going to just get started because I realize this is the last session and then everyone gets to go have fun. So I'm actually going to start with a little bit of a big picture here. So there were a lot of questions in the last section about where does demand come from. These are going to be very large sort of macroeconomic trends, and then think about how it applies to your operation, and some of our panelists here will help make a direct connection. So first of all, just kind of state of the industry. Organics has been growing pretty healthily for a while now. It's definitely a trend, not a fad. You can see that if you look at total food sales, we're north of $60 billion. And that was accelerated during the early days of COVID, when everybody was driven back to the grocery store and people were pantry loading and we kind of weren't outside. And then it slowed. The growth has definitely slowed, but we're still, I think, ahead of where we would have been had COVID not happened. That said, as a percentage of total food shares, organic has lowered. We think those are knock-on effects of things like inflation. And we'll stay tuned for 2025 and see how the U.S. economy does, because that also impacts organics. On the right-hand side, you'll see just individual categories for food. I won't focus on so much of things like packaged snacks, because a lot of ingredients go into that, but take a look at that if you're growing food grade, if your intended market is food grade. But I just want you to look at things like meat, poultry, and eggs. That's where you're seeing larger, higher single digit and even into the double digit in terms of growth. So the feed for that, I know that the last section and a lot of folks here are focused on the food market, and that is definitely a growing category. But a lot of the grains in particular, and I'll focus my remarks mainly on grains, is going to animal feed. So just kind of be aware of that in terms of when you're thinking about diversifying your own operations and what markets look interesting to you. All right, so here's the big question. Is organic versus conventional? For those of you that are thinking about transitioning or have transitioned some and want to know if you're going to transition more, It's a little hard to read. I can make these slides available to anyone who emails the organizer or me afterwards. But organic has shown really good returns when you compare it to their conventional counterparts across the grains. I mean, there's a reason wheat is sometimes called poverty grass. The returns there are a little tougher. But for your standard corn, soybeans, wheat rotations, you can see that we pretty much are largely ahead of conventional for a variety of reasons, which I can talk about in the Q&A. Oops, now we need to move forward. Organic soybeans, so I will focus these remarks on corn, soybeans, and a little bit on wheat, but just know, I mean, I think one of the strategies that has come out of this group is that, there's life beyond corn and soybeans are traditional cash crops. You can see, the point of this slide is how dependent we are on imports, and imports are getting tougher, both because of the political environment, tariff uncertainty, I think, environmental uncertainty, supply chain shocks. There's an opportunity for growers who want to supply the U.S. domestic market. Formally and historically, we have relied on about 80% of our organic wheat for either meal or whole beans is coming from outside of the U.S. So there are buyers out there that are intentionally wanting to buy from U.S., from American growers. Corn is a little different story, a lot different story actually. So corn, we are much closer to self-sufficiency. You can see that the stocks, the imports, that blue and the light blue are much lower. So we produce a lot of our own corn here. The warning I have here, or the challenge/opportunity for U.S. growers, is that the story for a long time has been, hey, corn is one of your cash crops, so make some money on corn and maybe don't make as much money on some of the other rotations. What happens, and the story is we want to grow American, right? But imports actually have a bit of a protective effect in a strange way. And what I mean by that is you can shut imports on and off. If you get long corn, if you got a lot of corn in storage, you have a great harvest year, imports just kind of fall away a little bit, and then you get some price support for organic corn. What happens in 3 to 5 years, which is what we're predicting, when the U.S. is producing enough organic corn for our own needs, and then some? So now you're perpetually long, that means perpetual downward pressure on corn prices, barring something like a weather shock or something else. And so thinking about where corn fits into your rotation, how much of your overall profitability depends on corn, I think diversifying away from corn into some of the small grains or food grade grains is not a bad strategy. And you give, or on-farm storage, so you don't have to sell it immediately, and you can maybe wait for a better price, is not a bad idea. I usually don't give advice on how to run operations, but I do think that for corn, it's worth thinking about where that fits into your business operation. And then just a little bit of will it pay to grow organic grain? So this is a bunch of numbers. Maybe I won't go through all of these, but the bottom line is that for something like soybeans, we're still profitable. Corn needs to come up a little, 20, 30, 40 cents a bushel before you're really hitting break even and then into profitability. And then winter wheat prices are still a little bit tough, but because of weather and some other conditions out west, we are seeing a little bit of support for organic wheat prices. So, last but not least, should I produce for organic markets? Well, these are the conditions, these are the questions I would ask. Of course, the big question is what are, for those of you that haven't started transition or just started transition, you're really asking what are markets going to look like in 2 to 3 years? That's really hard to know. I wish I had a crystal ball. We've seen some pressure. I mean, ag overall is under a lot of pressure. We've seen some organic acreage just come out of production, we think because of prices going down, but these things tend to be cyclical. The saying in economics is nothing cures high prices like high prices, and nothing cures low prices like low prices. So sometimes you want to think about going against the cycles, not just following the trends. Organic protein is up and dairy is coming back. So people are rebuilding their dairy herds. Half of organic feed demand comes from dairy cows. So something to keep in mind, again, with diversifying across food, feed, operations. And then imports are mattering less and less each year for corn, but that is not yet the case for soybeans. And last, this is probably, I don't need to tell this crowd because this is experienced, sounds like experienced marketers and whatnot, but developing relationships. And really, I don't know how many stories, I was just listening to the CEO of Organic Path talking about, and they are a huge operation now, talking about how they they really got involved with their growers and to help share the risk with them, especially in the early years, and that relationship has endured and it's allowed them all to grow together sustainably. So with that, I will pass the mic over to my colleagues.
And again, I'm Michael with Fieldcraft and Resource, specialty grains and ingredients for food and beverage production. So we work with a lot of different types of growers and a wide range of buyers. So you get a sense how that scene looks right there. So we talked about brewers, distillers, bakers, malt houses, all that quite a bit today. I would like to point out the brands and manufacturers that we work with. There's over 80,000 brands and manufacturers in the United States alone. And they launch over 20,000 new food and beverage products every year. So this is a big opportunity. Now, they're also different beasts. The folks in the middle on the buy side, they're a little more flexible, agile. Brands and manufacturers, they have their own set of requirements. So this, I would not recommend starting with them first. Their planning is a little bit longer and they're document driven. So not just your organic certification, but also specification sheets that go beyond grain tests, COAs potentially. So that's what we do. Then of course, everywhere from independent farms, I put millers down there. We primarily work with value-added operations. So we're filling this gap where Fieldcraft is, and this is based on my observations to everything that follows this. We don't really focus on large volume corn, soybeans, wheat, the traditional varieties, nor do we focus on direct consumer markets. All that is very good and helpful. We're right there in the middle, 45% of growers in terms of sales focus on these markets, and I would just call that specialty. So specialty corn, soybeans, wheat, fine, all the small grains, that's what we do. And these markets are highly fragmented. So another way to look at that would be just think in terms of pallets. So bags with pallets, totes, one going to a distiller, all the way to 300,000 pounds from a tortilla manufacturer looking to source organic yellow corn to make in totes, full truckload volumes. That's our sweet spot. Oh, and that reminds me too, spot is how we started. That's still kind of our sweet spot. So overage, surplus, and shortage as well. That's our start. We are getting into forward contracts. We get to get on with origination, so production contracts. We're almost there now. So some of the other challenges and opportunities, one of the biggest complaints I hear from buyers all the time is, great, I'd love to source all this, what do you have? And that's an issue, I think, with growers. What's in the field? What's in the bin? What's available? We still speak in lead times, so it doesn't have to be available right now. But if the harvest is coming up, 3 months, that's fine, especially for those grain manufacturers that have a lot of planning behind us. But we don't know what this is. So the portfolio that's up here, this is a value-added operation that sells corn, especially corn, to a distiller. They don't process any of their grains until they have a contract in place to buy from that distiller, or for the distiller to purchase from them. But they have milling equipment, so they could mill spec. So and the images we found really helped. It spiked sales leads, not just sales leads, but also quality leads. When the buyers actually knew what they were looking at, what they were sourcing, we could crack it, we could mill it, and of course find whatever the buyer would do. And of course, buyers have an easier time using something. And I'll get to this later in terms of the different types of buyers that we run into. Simplified sourcing, then the logistics, customized warehousing, they're able to reduce the costs. And again, this is based on our observation in that gap. What can growers do? And I've been to all these sessions today with y'all. So these popped up. So relationships, not just with buyers, but I was talking about knowing a neighbor, knowing a processor or a miller who could maybe do this on your behalf. The options, that goes right into that next step. We get a lot of just hopper bottom load inventory. And that's great, but you start opening up more markets as soon as you do one thing to it. So even if it's just cleaning, grading, color sorting, packaging, and everyone knows that we had an hour-and-a-half session on supply chain where we just started scratching the surface of a lot of the stuff. The certifications, one thing I did want to point out, organic buyers, they will have to buy organic grain. That's not the same scenario that producers are in. As a matter of fact, we have almost 25% of buyers who are not certified. They have a conventional product, but they want certified organic grain. And there's a lot of reasons for that. You can talk to me afterwards on the Q&A as to why they want to do that. Some of it's brand, see the slide to the left here. Some of it's branding, some of it's the testing that they want, some of it's transitional. They want to say that they're promoting organic practices, but not necessarily, a completely organic product. And the growing number of buyers, I was cracked up with it. That's a 2018 number right there. 83% of millennials and Gen Z now run and make buying purchases or purchasing decisions. And so it's not just these brands that are coming along, or brewers and distillers, it's these large food manufacturers. And these people are now category buyers in these food brands, these traditional food brands, and they don't want to do things the same way. They just want a level of convenience that the predecessors didn't have. Options for buyers, this mostly applies to these small, medium-sized buyers. They are used to, in some cases, the net terms, like net 30. The grower gets paid immediately, but they don't want to pay for cash flow reasons, like net 30 all the way to 90. Of course, there's instant break quotes, which factors into the pricing of the custom warehouse, I know as mentioned. And then this whole day has been about differentiation. Everyone is trying to do it. The customer is trying to do it, so your story is important. By giving them a reason to promote that to their customers, especially the ones like brands and manufacturers, they're trying to compete with other products on the shelf. So all of that just helps them. And you can take a look at fieldcraft.com if you have questions, or email me at michael@fieldcraft.com. Thanks.
All right. I didn't bring pictures. We get to look at this beautiful slide for a few minutes while I chat. I am at the very opposite end of the spectrum. These folks are talking truckloads and world markets, and I'm in my neighborhood, right? I started growing everything that I could on my farm, and I knew with small acreage that the only way that was going to be supportive was if I could mill it and turn it into a final product and capture every cent of that $3 possible. That quickly grew to, I can't grow enough. Like, milling these fresh milled products is very popular. It's very attractive. It turns out really good products. So we've got granola makers, we've got bakers, we've got folks that want to use it. We've got a lot of just in-home use. So what we're looking at now as we grow is that I'm trying to support other growers, whether they want to sell to me or whether they want to sell to one of the other millers that's in the room. Not everybody has the cleaning equipment. Right, so we've got folks who wanted to become millers. So what they do, they ran out, they bought a mill, and they put it into a building. Well, then the first time they grew with a farmer, they saw what bin run wheat looked like, and they were like, I can't put that in my mill. You got to clean it. Well, the farmer didn't have the cleaning equipment. So that's where, I'm starting to build out a mill that will be able to process my own product better, more efficient, but also help other growers get into that market. The organic certification for me is something that I always had conversations. I was always at a scale where I could just have conversations rather than certifications. But now the organic certification for not only the farm but for the mill is becoming more and more attractive. Small enough scale, I can easily tool one day to be conventional farmer that I know I don't want to do any work with anybody that's working with ground up. Just a personal decision from my own head. But still, like non-organic grain, I want to be able to run it. If I know the farmer, I know it's responsible. So I'm developing, SOPs, standard operating procedures, so that I can run my mill organic on some days and non-organic products on others. To just try to maximize my ability to help folks and just stay in the market, right? The only grain I can buy is conventionally grown, not certified organic. I need to be able to work with that. We're just kind of early on in this journey, and very much in the community grain rather than the commodity grain scale.
I like the phrase community grain.
That is a good one. Scott, you're from New Jersey, right?
Yes.
Well, hopefully if you do get a system set up, you can start convincing more growers to convert to organic if they're going to run grain through your cleaner and your bin system.
Yeah, I think we can. There's a lot of industries like the mushroom industry in southern Pennsylvania where a lot of these operations they're finding ways to reach productivity using organic methods and organic certification. And then it's just a matter of marketing. So a lot of the mushrooms that are in the marketplace these days are grown organically, but they know that they've got a market share that says, not everybody wants to buy an organically labeled mushroom. They're still growing them all organic. So let's just get to a point where we can teach growers and millers and operators to just behave clean, organic, these environmentally friendly and appropriate methods, and then let folks market it any way they want. Maybe you don't want to put it on as organic certification on the final product, but.
I'm going to turn it over to the audience. If anybody wants to jump in and ask any questions, feel free.
So, one question that I've got is that a lot of small grains are very disease prone in the Mid-Atlantic. It's a factor of the climate. And I'm curious about your perspectives on when to take the risk on something that's fairly disease prone, and maybe you'll just have a totally unacceptable product after a rainstorm right before you harvest, versus like when to risk it versus just try a safer crop.
My perspective on that is to first just always have your worst case scenario outlet in mind, which is frequently the animal market or the mushroom industry. The mushroom industry is hungry for just raw materials, right? They need something to grow spawn upon. They're generally going to sanitize it, sterilize it before they use it. So there's any number of crops that you can grow and completely fail at for various environmental reasons and still have a potential market as either, mushroom raw material or, obviously a slightly higher grade. You could have something in the animal feed market.
And the other thing that keeps coming up too is the pre-plant contracts. At least some agreement, handshake agreement. The first sale that happened on Fieldcraft, wild success, and then go with us. So that there's one pallet going to a distiller, and a few months later, he just go with us out. So that was a customer service issue we had from their side. I get it, and that's after the field, you think that you're safe, and it argument goes out. But I'd say a strong relationship with the buyer.
Thank you. I'm Beth Sastre. I work with Virginia Crop Extension in Loudon. And Scott, I like the comment that you make about the organic certification. I know that there are many farmers that are small farmers that follow organic or biorational practices. However, going through the certification is very expensive and it's very laborious. And so if you are the only one farming and doing all that stuff, that makes it very hard. Is there naturally grown certification also, have you considered that, because that is a very easy certification and follow the same practices as organic certification?
I suppose the strength of the National Organic Standard did its job in the 90s, right? Like it really made it nationally present in the consumer's mind that the organic stamp means something. So if I personally were to go for certification, it's going to be NOP, right? It's going to be the National Organic Standard, just because of the efforts and the success of the marketing of that marketing program, right? Certified naturally grown is or can be easier to attain for some growers, and then some folks like to stack them up, just have third-party certification upon third-party certification upon the GAP, Euro GAP. They're organic and they're naturally grown and they're rock, they're regenerative organically grown. I mean, some people are just, there's not enough labels to put on. For me, it's like I'm a one-person show. Like I'm doing this, so there's only so many hours in the day. And a lot of growers are like that. And I think, in my opinion, if you're going to go after one certification to really help you stand out and increase your market share, it is the National Organic Program. It's got its faults, and it's got its diluted aspects these days. It's kind of a race to the bottom. Capitalism puts us all in, but to me, it still has the most value of a lot of the certifications.
All right. we'll get into some market related questions here. What key factors do you see kind of influencing the old crop, the market that we're in right now? And what factors do you think are going to influence new crop as we head into fall?
So we have seen, so I'll talk wheat markets for just a moment. We actually saw last year, we saw folks selling organic wheat into conventional markets. What happened was they had wheat in the bin and you had to make space. Wheat prices were pretty low. And so you just had growers making the decision to get it out, clear up some bin space. That has changed now, kind of as I talked about the pendulum, things go kind of far one way or the other way. And so part of the reason I think that we've seen a rise in wheat prices is that now you've got buyers saying, it's a mixed picture, not every buyer will give you the same story, but there are at least a cadre of buyers who are saying we're counting on some stuff in storage and it's not there, and so now we're having to go out and offer higher prices. Of course, the thing to watch right now, as always, is weather. And so we keep a close eye. It's one thing to look at a general drought map or precipitation map, but it doesn't really tell you anything because organic growth tends to be concentrated in certain areas. You can't just say, like, here's a map of Iowa or Virginia or anything. So we try to keep an eye on certain zip codes, certain counties where we know organic production is concentrated. And as we get into it's planting time for soybean and corn, and then later harvest time for wheat, for winter wheat, we will start updating on weather conditions because that's the big thing to see. If we get a good, nice, strong, good weather, then of course we're going to get better yields. Better yields means more supply and more options for buyers. The other thing is it's crazy right now. I don't actually know how to do the analysis here because I like predictability and certainty. We just don't know. There's a lot of things that are going on at the policy level, so we don't know what the impact tariffs are going to have. We bring in a lot of organic grain through Canada. We did bring in a lot of grain through India. That's somewhat dropped off prior to the current situation, but I would say keep an eye on tariffs because that can impact the prices that you're seeing for domestic grain. And then, the reality is organics, I think, in better shape than conventional ag because we've had to grow without the sort of huge subsidies that conventional has had. However, it still matters. So to your point about getting organic certification, we've for a long time relied on cost share programs to help offset the costs that come with certifying organic. Will those continue on? I don't know. A lot of funds have been frozen, so we're watching carefully to see if we're still going to be able to depend on those funds to help offset the cost and the risks to organic growers. So hang on to those certifications if you have them already, because re-upping certification, getting new certifications could get more expensive. And I would say also look to your local departments of ag to see if they've got programs that can help you out with certification costs.
As far as outlooks, I don't know, last couple of years, somehow or another, the weather's been really good to have on the East Coast, in our area, for very low fusarium rates in wheat. We've been dry at just the right times. Obviously last year, like the drought that came in across New Jersey, a lot of Pennsylvania, it was just really problematic. And that's leaving a lot of us in question to what our winter wheat's going to look like because it didn't get rain until December. So even if you planted quote unquote on time, you're kind of lucky if you were late because you may have had sprouting and then death because it was so dry. Some of us, a lot of us, I think, waited, hoping it was going to rain, and then finally said, I can't wait any longer, I just got to put it in the ground. It still didn't come up. Maybe it came up with 1 or 2 leaves, and now we're kind of hoping that was enough to have survived the winter and still tiller out well. So there's certainly a lot of concern that I hear from folks in our area about what this year's wheat crop will look like, that's for sure.
For specialty grains, it's entirely possible to predict. I mean, I think in terms of junior bread versus bloody butcher bread corn. So with that, at the macro level, I can only think of organic and regenerative. Still, organic is the standard grain. Regenerative, we're still in the earlier cusp of that. I'm talking about rock, but just regenerative as a practice. But yeah, in terms of the macular or micro specialty grains, it's tough to predict.
I'll have you answer in reverse order for this one, but out here in the Northeast or the Mid-Atlantic region, we'll call it, I guess you would say, corn, wheat, and soybeans, as far as organic grain production goes, would be your top three. Do you see any movement in the specialty markets with any grain that is showing that it could break through? You know, like sunflowers would be a good example. You know, that has a big conventional market, but is lacking in maybe a transitional or organic space.
Yeah, that's a great question. Sorghum, it was interesting, we were just talking about popping sorghum and how challenging that is. We just had an order that was placed for 20,000 pounds of white sorghum, organic, to pop. Right, so that's another headache, but I see sorghum pop up quite a bit, oats as well. That's another one. Rye is always great for distillers. Organic, I'm not really sure about though. I think that's more of the conventional. They're looking for like a terroir. If there is something unique to the Mid-Atlantic, that's another good selling point. Like it differs from the Midwest to the Southwest for those types of rye. But I'd probably say those two. And I know sorghum is primarily feed, but I think more people are starting to discover that one in particular.
I'll ask a follow-up to that kind of touches on some climate. Are you seeing growers in different areas that are testing out or experimenting growing grains that traditionally haven't been grown in those types of climates? You know, climates farther south that are a little bit warmer, climates farther north that are a little bit warmer. You know.
Yeah, in Arizona. We're just talking about distillers, and anyone who really knows that industry, how much distilling is actually taking place versus these new distillers actually buying bourbon that's been aged already. But we have several growers down in Arizona from chickpeas, wheat, white snore, bluebeard, stacking, different varieties that you just wouldn't expect from there. But that is a huge selling point. It's almost like as far fluting as you can get it, the better, because now it's something that people want to try. And I've seen this in the Mid-Atlantic as well. I work really closely with a 12th generation farm in Virginia, south side of the time. I forgot my Virginia locations, but southern Virginia. But he used to grow tobacco, and now he's got a mixed operation, conventional and organic, and he's the one that's also grows produce. So, actually, as a matter of fact, we don't do produce, but we had a major retailer that was looking to source romaine, and I hooked him up with this person who's growing romaine in Virginia, and they're like, "What? Not Salinas?" So that's what I get excited about on the local, the regional part of this. First, it's just dollars and cents in terms of freight, get it there closer, reduce the cost, and then what grows. So romaine in Virginia on the East Coast, pretty cool.
Just because it hasn't been grown historically doesn't mean you can't. Scott, go ahead.
Being very much at the community level, I've got a lot of ethnic communities that are coming to farmers markets who are very much interested in the millets, the sorghums, the buckwheats, the grains that are very much minor players in our overall commodity markets. So as we are scaling up, we're trying to find ways to satisfy those, either by growing the little bits on our farm, or by getting the equipment in to say like dehull buckwheat or dehull sunflower seeds, just exploring options like that so that we can kind of try to fill some of those niches a little bit. Yeah, there's definitely opportunities for certainly smaller growers to take chances. One of the chances that we're taking as the climate gets a little squirrely is, we had 3 or 4 years in a row where it was so warm all winter long and our oats never died on all the vegetable crops around us, right? They use vegetable growers use that oats as a winter kill cover crop to protect their soil. Well, year after year after year, they just don't die. And so, you know, this fall we planted oats, saying, let's give it a shot, let's see if they survive. I'm going to give them another week. But we did actually finally have like a cold winter, so it wasn't the best winter to try it, but it's something that I would try again, right? Like, so as we're adopting and looking for different options and different ways to mitigate unpredictability, just start to get creative, right?
That's going to be a harvested cover crop.
So for me, it would be a harvested crop, an intentional crop.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the comment about the ethnic communities is a good one. You know, with larger Latino populations, the demand for white corn has been growing. We're seeing $11, $11.50 a bushel for white corn, organic white corn. So that's a nice premium on, you know, organic corn prices. Of course, you're getting maybe some lower yields. The thing I watch for these is where's the infrastructure developing? Because like you said, I mean, you can eat up everything with freight, you know, if there's not enough, if there's nowhere to take it once you get it off, you know, crop off. So we watch where certified milling operations are popping up. And you collect these interesting stories too, and it's really like how entrepreneurial. I think everyone in here, farmers are entrepreneurs by default, I think. And your comments or question about like how do you take a chance on something, and mostly it's like, can you do it on 5 acres or 10 acres to start and then grow from there. But just some of the stories, not necessarily organic, but I think they're fascinating. I met a group of growers in Maryland that are growing indigo because of natural dye. They've tapped into a natural dye market, and it's really kind of fascinating. I hope they write it up as sort of a case study. The problem is when you're out there growing it and doing it, sometimes you don't have time to like, you know, tell about it. So I think that's really interesting. I heard from a group of farmers, this is Kansas, a little far afield from here, but they're growing teff for Ethiopian communities. So again, an ethnic community that is saying, you know, we'd like to be able to get teff, and it's hard for us today to get the quality we want, so they're growing. They've kind of formed a community, a relationship with these buyers. So.
Any questions from the audience before I just keep going?
I need to follow up this question about born soybeans after the fun specialty crop conversation, but I'm curious. I've talked to a couple of growers that are, you know, they're starting to back away from soybeans again. You know, we're off those crazy highs we had. In your analysis of the market and other growers around the country, where do you think is the sweet spot for, you know, people willing to take the risks to grow beans, maybe introduce weeds in their fields, and, you know, whatever it may be, or, you know, but you did just mention earlier that you saw that as still a profitable crop, even more so than corn potentially now. Is there like a number that you feel is a tipping point that will either keep acres where they are domestically or reduce acres considerably?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. One of the reasons we import so many soybeans, or historically have, is because there hasn't been a market for the oil. So, you know, you grow the soybeans. This is what I tell folks, be careful what you wish for, because you grow the beans, you crush it because we want the meal, right, for the animal feed. And then what do you do with the oil? You end up having to dump it. Well, oil prices have gone up, so it's made it a little more attractive. You can kind of still make your money on the crush. And that has been helpful for increasing acres. Plus, like you said, when we had crazy run-ups of price. I mean, 2 years ago, 18 months ago, we were seeing $44 a bushel soybeans. That's unheard of. I mean, that just is nuts. And it's come back down to more historical average, so floating around the 19.5 bushel dollar, you know, per bushel range. That's still profitable. We think you could lose another $2 and still make a profit. Now, there's a lot of variation regionally, right? If you're doing something, if you're getting kind of average yields, if you are close to someplace that can handle the soybeans, you're not going to lose a bunch of money in freight. There's a lot of ifs with that. Do you own your land versus renting it? So you have to do your own numbers. But if you're kind of close to the average, or close to the mean on that, you're still making, you know, a few dollars profit on your soybean acres, whereas you're not right now on your corn. And so we would see, if it comes down more than that, you think you'll see acres start to flee out of soybeans and into other things. If it goes up again, you'll see folks get back into soybeans. The other reason I caution why it's really hard to just do a run up on soybeans is this is the trade of all organic, right? Like, there's no such thing as like corn on corn or just a corn bean rotation. You're having to rotate other stuff. So if you put more acreage into beans, you got to figure out the rest of your rotation. And so it's not possible to just say, well, I want to increase beans, but I don't want to increase corn or something else. You're always going to have an increase in multiple crops, and you got to find markets for those crops. So it's like a chess problem. It's a three-dimensional equation problem. Because sometimes you get buyers saying, well, why don't you just grow more beans? But, so the best thing that we can do if we want to grow more beans is to find markets for the other stuff too. Like the diversification is the lifesaver here, I think.
$25 a bushel.
Oh, I think there's some gentleman here.
What role could the potential 25% U.S. tariffs play into the pricing of American commodity prices here in 10 or 12 days?
Yeah, it's so again, you're going to see beans taken on the chin if that does go into effect, because most of our beans, well, a lot of our beans are coming in through Canada. We will tell you that some of those are not Canadian beans. This gets into questions of origin and even fraud. We did a little bit of a white paper about how many beans are being grown in places like Western Africa and then going to Canada and down to the U.S. So the reality is, whether you believe those beans are grown correctly or not, Canada is a major source of our organic soybeans. Argentina is one of the other big sources. So it would cause in a way, if you're growing soybeans, this might help you out, right? Like, you might get a little bit of a better price because beans are going to get more expensive. So then you can raise your prices for domestic beans because you're not competing against sort of the rock bottom prices of beans grown overseas. So that could be a little bit helpful. Now, keep in mind, for the animal protein guys, it's going to be a little painful. They're going to need to feed their cows and their layers and their broilers, and their feed prices are going to go up. So mostly what that does is get passed along to the consumer. And I like to say, economists, our favorite saying is like, there's no free lunch, right? So it's not a universal effect on anybody. It depends on what group you're part of. Of course, all of us in this room want people to keep buying organics, and not, and they're paying attention to where their food dollar goes. You've got the strength of the organic brand against the fact that the reality that people just have a certain amount of money to spend on food. So, it's hard to tell what the net is. Maybe in the short term you get some higher prices for your beans. In the long term, you want to make sure that market keeps growing through consumer demand.
I will add to that, speaking from my position as a broker, some Canadian companies have come to us and said if that does go through, then it would just be a canceled contract altogether. I think what they're going for with the tariffs is more short term, and so I don't think they'd be canceled for long. But it's all speculation still at this point. But those are the things being tossed around right now. Anybody else? We did just go through a little bit of a bout with avian influenza here in the Northeast, and throughout other regions in the country. Did you see any regional movement in markets with any fallout from that?
I get random cold calls every day with people asking me for eggs. How do you even know that I have 40 chickens? Like, I'm not an egg producer. I don't advertise as an egg producer. I'm just like Joe Farmer on the internet. And everybody and their brother is looking for eggs. It's got to take a hit on feed because there's a lot of dead chickens. So is there a lot of extra feed floating around the market? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we watched the USDA slaughter numbers for organic poultry, turkeys, and chickens. And I don't know, I think USDA is in turmoil, y'all, because they've been behind on their updating their slaughter numbers. I mean, we know organic flocks are also having to be culled. If you give me, email me directly, because I think in another 2 weeks we will have kind of our numbers on what we think the number of organic chickens that have succumbed to avian influenza are. So far, like I said, the story has been, we're talking about low prices for corn and meal. So I don't, while that might have added a bit of downward pressure on it, we haven't seen like a major dip or anything like that. It's just sort of a bunch of different factors that have come together. And even if the flocks numbers are down a little, like I said, dairy cows are picking up a little of the slack right now. So we haven't seen a huge impact, I would say, on prices yet, but give me a couple of weeks and some new numbers will be coming out.
Any questions in the audience?
I will say it's funny how many calls we've gotten, just like in conversations, people are like, should I get a backyard flock? I'm like, maybe. I bet you I could grow chickens and get $30 a dozen eggs. Like that's what it would my cost of production would be. It is hard to keep hens alive, and I don't know. I hope people are saying, what I hope this is giving people an appreciation of our food production, because you just can't grow it, as a hobby and come close to anything that you could do, or any of you in the room could do. So, that's what I think.
Yeah. But you can go to Tractor Supply and buy a bag of Kallenbach organic backup layer feed and, do your part.
Wayfair has chicken coop for $2,000. That is some high price chicken coops.
So speaking of, backyard flocks and that sort of stuff, almost everything in the organic industry is driven by consumerism top down. Do you see any growing market space for alternative feed rations, non-wheat, non-corn, non-soy? We talked about milo and sorghum. I've had some small feed millers come to me recently and say, hey, what would organic milo cost to put it in my ration as a corn replacement? Do you talk about that?
Well, just quickly, there are a lot more people who are asking for soy-free products, and there's a growing number of people who are asking for corn-free products. I'm not sure why. Everybody's got their own reasons, but it's big enough that New Country Organic here in Virginia is running a very robust business in all soy-free feeds. And it's a little bit more expensive because putting the peas in there and enough sunflowers to make up that protein difference is a little bit more expensive, but the consumers are asking for it, so large-scale producers are producing it, or I guess they're kind of middle market producers are making it. I mean, I for one am buying it in because I've got people that keep asking me, can I get feed from you? And so, I mean, it's out there. It's certainly part of a growing trend.
Well, I think much like with the demand for domestic organic grains, I think part of diversifying what farmers can grow on the larger scale would come from, trends like that. So, like you talk about peas, more farmers, I think, could explore cover crop peas as a harvestable crop. And yeah, the list goes on, but I think that's a good direction.
I mean, there's a lot of people doing work on it. Practical Farmers of Iowa has, for a long time, been trying to get folks to substitute in, and kind of, they've worked directly with a lot of nutritionists, animal nutritionists, to try to, kind of work on the science behind that. It's again a question of how big does it need to be be interesting to your operation, and then who in the area is handling it. It's pardon the pun, it's like a chicken or an egg problem, right? Like where's the demand coming from, and how big does the demand have to be before you take a chance on it, and that demand will be there year after year, and then you've got some place that you can process it. Fortunately, unfortunately, it's just a factor right now. Corn and soybeans is when you're talking about the big herds and the big flocks and the stuff that you've got a source for. That's where a lot of the demand is at. But I agree with you, peas and some other things. We've never been able to produce good prices on alfalfa, for example, on forages, but I think it's definitely something to pay attention to. Anything that you can tap into a grass-fed market or something like that, then you've got a place to put in those nitrogen-fixing crops that can be so important to the rotation.
That's where I've seen a lot of grass-fed areas too. Michael, in the specialty grain realm, do you see any demand for food grade or feed grade end use. Like I have a customer who occasionally will take some organic blue corn to put it into their feed ration. Do you see anybody reaching out for that?
Yeah, I was going to jump in just on this last one as well. Everyone with livestock production is familiar with the whole animal problem. Everyone's trying to solve that. Who's going to deliver and hard to sell the whole thing? And that's better for those smaller scale producers versus the large commodity. I kind of see the same thing with some of these grains. They don't have to be small grains or anything like that. But I never thought that we'd be involved in the feed markets. But we kind of are. So rice hulls, brokens, things like that. So to me, this is kind of like a whole crop problem as well, with the same benefit as those the livestock producers had in trying to sell the whole part of this. So organic soybean meal, that was something we just transacted last week. It was the first time we did that. And that, of course, goes to what they were going to sell it to a conventional feed mill or some other kind of feed operation. But we are going to connect those organic markets so they get a better price for that. So all of that is going to help, of course, sunflowers. So the pricing, cost of production, everything needs to factor into more aligned markets. It's hard when you're dealing with a whole bunch of different crops, but we are starting to now think a little bit more in advance of, okay, how do we sell everything that comes with this?
In the audience. Along the whole animal, it's kind of like sell the whole farm, right? You're not a soybean grower. You're a soybean grower, you're a corn grower, you're a wheat grower, you're potentially a grass grower for hay in between, depending on what kind of rotation it is. And we need good prices for all of these things. But corn, soybeans, and wheat have the massive mechanization, they have the massive scale, they've got the massive, everything's just marketed to just mass industry. And the more we can bring smaller regional players on board to help make markets for these other crops, the better off we're all going to be, because the world markets aren't going anywhere. They're always going to be out there floating up and down. But what we have to focus on building is regional markets that can respond to consumer demands in a realistic time frame. It's not going to, you can't retool a world market. It's going to take 10 years. But I could retool, my mill in a couple of months, right? You get me a new piece of equipment, I could bring a new crop on board. That could be days, depending on how close it is.
That's a great point too, like crop rotations. So I've had a lot of conversations with the large miller, and they only buy wheat, but their sales team, this is their transitional program. So how do you convince more people to become organic? Those 3 years that are very tough for a transition. Well, their sales team sells their own wheat, of course. They sell every other thing. They try to sell every other thing that's in that crop rotation. So we are organic potato markers now. We are organic alfalfa markers. Everything else that comes with that rotation that's necessary to get them that wheat.
To that point, would you say that diversification, let's say you have only 100 acres or 1,000, but diversification of crop within that 1,000 acres is more important than focusing on, say, getting 10,000 acres of one thing especially in order to bring prices down? What is your viewpoint on what's more effective in the short and long term?
It's a lot. Right? Like we're all taught in all of the economic classes you've ever had, whether it was 101 or you went all the way through to an economist, like it's just scale. You've got to get big. So you've got to do 10,000 acres. That's the only thing that we're ever taught. You have to do 10,000 acres. If it's 1,000 acres or 10,000, you got to do 10. That's the only way you're going to make money. Economies of scale. I mean, yes, it's true to a degree, but like just break out of the giant model, I think, is what we have to do. We have to just find the product that you want to grow, the product that you want to make special, the product that you want to market to the people that want you to market it to them, and do 5 acres of it. I mean, that's the only way that I made it work, right? I started with 5 acres of oats. And when I could grow, I mean, I could have grown all 20 of my acres with oats, but obviously I need to rotate. And so I had to convince the neighbor, like, can you please just grow 1 acre of this? Like, just grow 1 acre this year. I promise, no matter what, I'll pay you for an acre of oats. And so he grew it, and then it was 5 acres, and then it's 10 acres, and now he's growing for me, and he's probably growing 15 or 20 acres because there's other folks that want to grow the same crop, right? Things catch on. So I don't know. I think you just have to play that game, and much like a rotational grazer, like you got to break up your farm into as many units as makes sense for the crops that you want to rotate through. And some years are going to be good ones for any given crop, and some are going to be bad. And God bless you if they all land, if it all comes up sevens.
I would also add that scale is one thing, but the other economic concept is hedging. So, also known as like putting all your eggs in one basket versus another. And only you know the type of business you want to run. Like there are people that we were talking before this panel about ecosystems and how there has to be room for like the super predators and there has to be room. Not everybody's going to bring down like the large game. You should be able to make a comfortable living with small game. And so what type of operation do you want to run? And that gets to like what type of lifestyle do you want? What type of, are you trying to pass this down to your kids? Or you're trying to, there's a lot of other questions that go into what's the correct decision for your particular operation.
So this question may be mostly for Kellee, but I'm wondering, you can examine organic trends nationwide, and I'm wondering what you can't really extrapolate to a regional market. Like, I'm wondering what makes, like, for Mid-Atlantic small grains trends different from national trends.
Yeah, at the very basic level, you mentioned soil types and disease, just things that grow where you get certain yields in, Nebraska are just not going to get those same yields here, or vice versa. I mentioned indigo. I think there was a gentleman from South Carolina, that was a traditional crop there. Try growing indigo in North Dakota and let's see what happens. So, some of it is just, kind of where you're planted and what working well with what's in your region versus trying to maybe work against that trend. But I will say the other thing is infrastructure, and I'll include freight in that. That's a really big one. I look at like someplace like Wisconsin where you have, I don't know what came first, you had Organic Valley, right? They grew up there, so you've got this animal, large, a bunch of different dairies that have grown in that state. Like again, this goes to the term of ecosystem. So now you have a land-grant university that pays a lot of attention to organic versus, maybe I don't know what University of Virginia or the land-grant here does, but how much do they pay attention to organic? Because there's not as much of a tradition here of that. They're not responding to organic growers. So everything from seed varieties to disease control, you have more resources, more tools in the toolbox. Someone else mentioned, if you're the lone organic grower, in a sea of conventional, now you've got cross-contamination, cross-pollination issues that if you've got a community of organic growers around you who may not have, all of those impact your cost of production and make it easier or harder, tailwinds or headwinds for your own operation. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those are some of the the things that are going on at the local level that the national trends can't really capture.
I would echo that. You just have a lot of feed industry here too. Wagner's, Kallenbach, Hillendale, there's a lot of feed industry here that's making feed for a lot of organic livestock. And the closer you are to your end use market, the better the price is that you're going to get, like you mentioned, with freight. So I think we have time maybe for one or two more. I don't know how we're doing. We're good? Good? All right. Any audience questions? All right. I did want to get back to tariffs a little bit. So talk about how tariffs and imports in general, I guess we could sum it up as, how do imports in general impact the price that the growers get here domestically, or even the Canadian growers? What challenges do they face because of maybe some challenges caused by imports?
Yeah, tariffs. That's the word of the day. So, again, I'm an economist by training. So I try to not be, or at least acknowledge the bias I face, because I want opportunities for American growers at the end of the day. But I will say, at a very large level, imports are just supply. So if you increase supply, like this is back to like your organics 101, this is where the supply and demand curve crosses, that's your price. So you increase supply, but you keep demand the same, and prices are going to fall. So on one level, tariffs do that. They keep downward pressure on prices because you've got an increase in supply without necessarily increasing demand. And so that would be, quote unquote, bad for organic farmers. But on the other hand, you've got the demand side, and you've got, people trying to get dinner for their kids, and you've got folks trying to feed animal herds. And so if you imports allow you to do that, I mean, imagine if all of a sudden magically you shut off imports tomorrow, just as a thought experiment. What you have is a lot of people getting out of the animal feeding business. They just they simply could not feed their herds, their flocks without imports, not overnight. So, if you want to become, if self-sufficiency is the goal, and maybe it is, I'm not saying it is or it's not, then you want to have kind of a glide path to lower imports over time rather than cause a shock to the system. And to my mind, tariffs cause a bit of a shock to the system, which is tough for people to absorb, again, in the short term. And especially if tariffs come on and off and on and off, then the market gets kind of whipsawed. So almost everyone here can adjust if you're given enough preparation for something. What's hard to adjust to is, the thing that's unexpected that happens this year and may not happen next year. I don't care whether that's weather, or whether that's tariffs, or whether that's some other shock. So overall, I view tariffs as a net negative, particularly when you don't know what's going to happen from week to week or month to month or year to year. So that's kind of my broader picture. But it's the world we operate in, so you gotta try and adjust. It depends again on which side of the equation you're on, how you're gonna. We've heard of folks stockpiling and trying to hold on to supply. We've heard of folks saying, well, I'll just, I might adjust how much, I sell, or I can pass it on to the consumer. So people are using all sorts of strategies to deal with the uncertainty, and we'll see the net effect. And you also have to balance that against the broader economic. So tariffs operate within a larger, as long as we continue with robust organic growth, consumer demand. I'm always in favor of anything that helps communicate the value of the organic brand to consumers, because that's ultimately the engine that drives everything. Other than you tinker around with tariffs or subsidies or anything else, any other government intervention, but you really want that strong, consistent rise in consumer demand to help us all, keep growing sustainably.
Keep your markets local, right? Keep your circles tight.
Yeah, that was going to be my quick one. I know we're over, but the existing contracts are continuing, new ones are drying up. That's from the end user food and beverage production standpoint. So the folks in Canada are talking about shipping out everything as much as they can into the United States with their existing customers. I rarely see now new deals being made across border. And it's largely, it's not tariffs or the tariffs, it's the uncertainty. I see uncertainty around all that. So there's local, and local is now rarely, British Columbia to Ontario. Same thing in the United States. We used to be in all the NAFTA countries, we still kind of are, but our focus has kind of reshifted back to the United States, both the end user there as well as the producer. So we are getting less international.
I'm just happy if I get out of New Jersey every once in a while.
Any last questions? Panel members, thank you for your time.